So very pleased to welcome two speakers. We have Jack Cosby and Alan Radbourne from UKCEH. Jack's research interests are in catchment hydrology and biogeochemistry. He moved to CEH from the University of Virginia about 10 years ago and is currently a CEH fellow. Alan is Science Project Manager at CEH, and he oversees the Plynlimon Research Catchment and manages the main project being undertaken there, focused in enhanced rock weathering and greenhouse gas removal. They're going to talk to us about the Plynlimon Catchments long-term experiment. So I think it's over to Jack to kick us off.
Thank you, Carly. Welcome, everybody. Plynlimon is new to the Ecological Continuity Trust. We've just joined. We're in the process of getting our website published at ECT now, but there's lots of other history about Plynlimon. And what Alan and I wanted to do today, since we're newbies on the block, is to spend a little bit of time explaining the history of Plynlimon and what's gone on there before and why it was accepted into ECT, and I'll do that. And there's been a lot of work that's been done across the years there, but we'll use Alan's time to bring you up to date on our most recent set of research projects that are starting in the catchment. So a little bit of a broad overview and then narrow down to just something that's happening right now. Alan, if you go for the next slide, please. Well, as many of you probably do know, Plynlimon research catchments have been around for a really long time. They've been managed by the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology right now. Originally, they were managed by the Institute of Hydrology, which became part of CEH. Their long-term studies, they've been very important over the years also in global and international studies, just because of the length of record, but also because of the good science that's been done there. Interdisciplinary science, primarily. Plynlimon's a very large set of research catchments. And we've done everything from geomorphology to groundwater work to kinds of things you're probably familiar with in terms of water supply and water quality. Findings using data from Plynlimon have been published quite extensively over the years. I think the last time we counted a couple of years ago, we found about 500 articles that use data from Plynlimon. So the kinds of information that we generate, it's really widely spread. And that's partly because from the very start, much of the Plynlimon record is freely available for the research community, either through the UKCEH Environmental Information, DEIDC, or just by contacting researchers at CEH that have data sets that you're interested in. And of course, like I said, now Plynlimon is in ECT, so we'll try to bring you up to date on what we do. Alan, if you will. Plynlimon is a paired catchment study. It's in mid-Wales, in the Cambrian Mountains. You can look at the map on the right-hand side and sort of tell where we're at. We're near the coast. We're over just behind Aberystwyth within mid-Wales. The catchments themselves, there are two of them. The Severn catchment is actually the headwaters of the Severn River, which is the longest river in the UK. And the other site is the headwaters of the Wye, which actually forms the boundary between England and Wales for much of its length. So the downstream parts of these rivers are really important for a number of reasons. The Severn River is about 70% conifer plantation. Now, this has been going on for a long time, and I'll get into the history a little bit later, while the Wye is basically just a shrub heath, improved grassland, and is subject to grazing. We call these living laboratories because these are not set-aside conservation areas. These are places where people are still making a living, where there's still commercial enterprise, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go along too. The combined catchment areas is about 20 square kilometers, so it's quite large, quite large. As I said, we're just a little bit from the coast. At the high part of the catchments up in the headwaters, we're about 750 meters above sea level in the Cambrian Mountains. The catchments get about 2.5 meters of rain. They're a sponge. They supply a lot of water for downstream regions, which is why there was such interest in these catchments in the very first place. And as we were just chatting to those of you that were here before we started, it's a cool place. It's about 7 degrees temperature on average. Next slide, please. So the Plynlimon studies really got started back in the 1960s. As I mentioned, it was the Institute of Hydrology, who's now become part of CEH, that basically started the study. I'll give you a little more history of that in just a moment. But we've become a multidisciplinary long-term study now, and we really participate in a lot of international programs as well as the work that we do in the UK. We belong to what's called the Critical Zone Observatories, which is an international group of paired catchments or single catchments studying integrated environmental responses. We're part of the ELTER Horizon 2020 program in Europe. We were part of the XPER program. So quite a lot of what we do involves collaboration with people coming into our sites or accessing data from our sites. And we have people coming and going all the time over the years. So there's a lot of things that we have that we've done in the past. At the bottom, you'll see our website at CEH. This is a good place to start if you're interested in this, working from there and through the links in that website, get some sense of the history that we've had. We can post this again later as we go along. Sorry to rush by. Next slide, please. So basically, why did Plynlimon get started back in the 1960s? This is really key to the kind of work that we've been doing. Way back in time, back in 1919, the Forest Commission was formed. And through the 1920s, there was really a widespread upland plantation of conifer forest. This was one of the key things, was to try to bring back the forest of the UK. And a lot of that was done on the UK uplands. And of course, that's where a lot of water supplies were as well. And so there was some discussion all throughout about how you manage this not to interfere with the other uses of the streams coming out. During the 1950s, Frank Law Sr. did a whole bunch of experiments looking at water use of forests and came to the conclusion that actually forests can remove a lot of available water from runoff and therefore from water supplies. And that was a kind of a controversial result because it really had a lot to do with how the forests were managed and competing resource uses. So in the 1960s, the government set up what was known as a hydrologic research unit, which was to try to study the question and to see if there was anything to this contention that forests actually divert water supply. HRU, the Hydrologic Research Unit, basically set up the first system of continuously monitored extensive water budgets in forested and non-forested catchments, which was the start of the Plynlimon paired catchment water balance experiment in 1968. The pictures that you're looking at there on the screen are from 1974. Just gives you a rough idea. The upper picture in the middle is one of the afforested areas in the early 70s. The lower picture is one of the moorland areas. If you look on the two on the left on the bottom a little bit, if you squint hard, you can see some of the early installations that were put in to measure rainfall and stream flows. The map on the right just indicates the extent to which these catchments were originally instrumented. But even so, looking at that rough terrain and 20 square kilometers, where do you put things? How much do you have to put out in order to really get a good handle on what the water budget was? So that was the beginnings of Plynlimon. Go ahead, Alan, if you will. And basically the question they were after was, do trees intercept more water than the short grass, and if there are any bad implications for the UK water resources? So that was the findings there, if you will, is that, yeah, they do, but it's always a but, isn't there, when you do these kinds of studies. So basically, if you look at the plot, you can see that the histograms indicate what the evaporative water loss was from forestation at different ages of the forest. The first two graphs showed 30 to 35 years and 35 to 40 years. Basically 20% reduction in stream flow for downstream reservoirs as a result of planting a forest. But as the forest aged, the amount of loss went down. The older forests don't use as much water as growing forests. And then when the forests were managed for their purpose to cut the timber out, of course, the water loss went well down. So it's a temporary thing. It depends not just on the fact that it's a forest, but how those forests were managed. Anyway, from that initial study looking at water balances, there's a huge hydrometric infrastructure that's in the Plynlimon catchments. You can see some of the plumes there, some of the weather stations that were put in. That gridded thing in the soil next to the weather station is actually one of the rain collectors that was developed in the Plynlimon studies. Trying to collect rain in a funnel bucket on top of a mountain when it's blowing a hoolie is really difficult to do. So the whole study developed a lot of modern or improved and modern instrumentation for looking at hydrology, which is one reason it became so well known in the hydrologic community. There were a whole series of storage rain gauges spread around the catchment, automatic weather stations. There's 5 stream flumes in use now, but there used to be 7 running at one time. There were 2 stream weirs put in, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And the data were collected on a wide range of different frequencies, from hourly to monthly to annual. Now, all of this intensity of sampling and recording data varies depending on what the particular studies are. But through the whole 55 years or so of Plynlimon, we've had a steady baseline set of measurements that we've been able to carry forward. Next, Alan. So what else besides water? Well, of course, erosion and stream sediment was one of the concerns about afforestation. Looking at the pictures again, you can get an idea that when you clear cut a forest or when you first start planting, there's a lot of disturbance of the land. And indeed, if you look at the sediment transport, the bed load and the suspended load in the streams, looking at that graph, the blue are the forest and the red are the moorland sites. Forest practices really affect the stream sediment concentrations, which affect in turn the invertebrate communities, the fish communities that are present. So it's not just about water supply, it's about ecological integrity, if you will, of the streams. So building on that infrastructure that was there, we started doing more intensive hydrochemical measurements in the streams of Plynlimon. And we've got a record of about 40 years now of continuous stream chemistry that we can look at. Alan? And this is just an example. I don't expect you to really be able to read that graph, but just to show you, there's from 1985 or so right on through to the present day. That stops in about 2020, but we keep this record going. It's pH, it's aluminum concentrations, acid neutralizing capacity, and the dissolved organic carbon, just to give you an example of what's there. Originally, this started out as acid rain studies. This is one of the things that moved into Plynlimon. It was originally water supply. In the 80s, we became concerned about acid deposition, and Plynlimon became a primary site to study the effects of acid deposition on upland systems. We are still part of what's called the Upland Waters Monitoring Network, which originally started out as the Acid Waters Monitoring Network in the 1980s. The map on the right shows other water systems, both standing water and streams in the UK that are part of this. So we've contributed to this for a long time. And it was really important because basically the results that we saw in terms of this acid rain improvement in streams from the peak, it affected international policy. It led to the signing of several different agreements to reduce deposition, long-range transboundary air pollution controls. So these kinds of data are not just of interest scientifically, but they actually have an effect on how we manage our land and the kinds of targets we set for ourselves for improvement. Next slide, please. And we're trying to constantly improve as we go along. You know, being around for a long time like that, keeping a long-term site going can be really difficult. I mean, technology advances, equipment gets better. There's a lot of capital cost in trying to keep up with what's going on. And it's worth it, though, just because those long-term records really have a lot to say with what's going on. In the upper left-hand corner there, you see the earliest images that we got of the Plynlimon catchments. Those are RAF flyovers in the 1960s. And they were stereoscopic. It's what they used to map out what the elevations were like. Next to it, you see a drone flight picture that we took. The ways that we observe these catchments has changed. We have satellites. We can look at all kinds of things that we never thought about using in the 1960s when we started. The pictures of the weather stations in our flume sites, they're now powered by solar cells. We're working on trying to get all the data digitally transmitted through cell phone connections instead of having to go out and read recorders all the time. Also ecological improvements. A lot of our flumes have had fish ladders installed there on the lower left, just because we need to be concerned not just about taking the science, but not interrupting what we're measuring. And there's some parts of technology that just never get better, like a Land Rover. It's still the best way to get around when you go out there. Alan, next slide, please. Just as an example of what we're going through in the future, Plynlimon is part of the Cosmos UK network. The map there on the right shows the red dots where this has been deployed. It's run by UKCEH, and it's a cosmic ray soil moisture monitoring network. It uses cosmic rays generated in the upper atmosphere, which bounce off of hydrogen ion in the soil to a collector in our station. The more water in the soil, the more hydrogen ion there is, and the more cosmic rays you can collect. And it has a very large footprint. That one installation can cover soils over about 12 hectares. And you can get a continuous record of the water concentration of the soil content of water through time. And this is really important for understanding hydrology, but it's also a good system for looking for problems about potential flooding if it's too wet, or drought stress on plants. The picture on the right is the Cosmos site that's up on Plynlimon. So we're one of those networks, and proud to be part of what's going on. Next slide, Alan. Moving ahead, there is something called the Flood and Drought Research Infrastructure, FDRI, that's just been funded in the UK. There's a lot of partners involved in this, and the UKCEH is one of them. There's several river systems, large river systems, the Severn is one, that were being considered to be completely instrumented. Increased digital capabilities without continuous real-time monitoring, with the idea that it's a best way to begin to manage flood and drought and land use effects on flood and drought within the UK. Now, Plynlimon is not there yet. I don't think they've actually made their final selection of sites, but because Plynlimon's in the headwaters of the Severn and has this long history, it's one of the leading candidates. And that's how the kind of work we do in Plynlimon, again, feeds into research that's a little bit further down the line. Next slide, Alan. And then finally, this is the one that I was talking about for Alan, experiments in Plynlimon. Plynlimon's really a large scale kind of a catchment study. And when you have catchment scale research, it's mostly about monitoring and looking at regional effects and decadal trends and what we call serendipitous science. Every now and then, if you look at something and watch it long enough, something happens that was unexpected, and that could be important. But within Plynlimon, we also do hill slope and plot scale research, which is really about experimental manipulations. It's about going into a system, doing something to it, seeing how it responds, understanding the processes, or testing hypotheses. And the one that Alan's going to talk about for now is something that's related to greenhouse gas removal from the atmosphere, enhanced rock weathering projects. He'll give you more details. It's generally the idea, if you look in the lower left, that in agricultural systems, if you spread this rock dust on a system, it'll capture carbon. If we look at our Plynlimon catchments, an awful lot of the UK is upland. A lot of the things that are developed in the lowlands, where we have highly mechanized infrastructure already in place, very difficult to apply in the uplands. And so when they come to us to do these kinds of research problems, the fact that we have long-term history, we know what is going on, plus we have experience in working in these rather extreme environments, makes that an attractive place for people to work. So I think I've probably used a little more time than I meant to. I'm going to be quiet and ask Alan to take over and tell you a little bit about our GGR experiment. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jack. Yeah, so I'm just going to give a little bit of an update and kind of background to this greenhouse gas removal demonstrator for enhanced rock weathering, which we've managed to embed within the Plynlimon research catchments. So this just brilliant site of broad scale catchment change, but then we find a little corner of it and we can test a quite specific example of what's going on in the context of the broader. So we've got this demonstrator site at Plynlimon as part of this wider catchment. So this specifically is in the River Wye site, so in the GUI, where it's an active farm, so it's low stocking of sheep. They're part of the Glacier agri-environment scheme, so they keep very, very low numbers of sheep on this land just to keep it down. And we've basically set up this paired subcatchment. So it's quite nice that we've got this large-scale paired catchment, but then we've sort of copied that and done a much smaller version of this subcatchment, where we've managed to find two side-by-side little streams that have water flowing all year, which is actually quite difficult to find. And they're about 5 hectares in size each. And so one of them is going to act as a control, where we're just going to monitor it in detail over the next few years. And then one of them we are treating with 2 lots of rock dust each May. So these are very much this organo-mineral, grassy, a little bit of peaty shrub sort of areas. So your typical upland kind of idea. I've got to say, when we did start, we then put all the equipment out, and it all got knocked over by Storm Eunice in May, which after 40 years of research there, we've never had such destruction and devastation that came. Just happened at the start of our demonstrator. So, but to be honest, if anything, that allowed us to reset. We then refocused to ensure that we had a full year of baseline data, which is great. And that has led onto the real start of this enhanced rock weathering trial. So enhanced rock weathering, for those that don't maybe understand quite what it is, it's spreading this basalt rock dust across the surface of the grass to kind of be a much more surface area of a natural process that happens. So underneath, the geological activity means that these carbonates are formed and released into the soil or into the water, but it's a very, very slow process. So the idea is you dig all that out, you crush it up thin and put it on top, and then it will dissolve. So it's kind of like the difference between putting a sugar cube into your cup of tea and just putting a big spoon of loose sugar into your tea. It will dissolve in much quicker. So that's kind of the idea of what we're doing. Should say we're not actually actively digging out all of this basalt. This is an additional benefit from the mining industry. So the miners take all of this out, and then all of the really fine stuff that is no good for road building or for commercial building use ends up on a slag heap that then we are kind of trying to use this additional benefit of the mining process. So not quite a waste product, but this sort of additional use of this, trying to add value to that process. So we take that, understand the chemical properties, make sure there's no kind of trace metals involved, and we go to very specific mines, or in this study, we're all using the same one, and then we spread this across the grass. Now, the main aim is to see if we can sequester more carbon, but then there's additional benefits and trade-offs that we're trying to constrain as part of this. Is this something that actually is scalable across the UK? Is this something we can do? Because one of the potential benefits that has been seen in sort of more mesocosm studies has been improved forage quality. So once you put this on, there's change in pH, or there's just all these extra small nutrients, micronutrients that aid the growth of the vegetation. It's kind of a bit like the liming process, how you would lime and then see this lovely fresh green grass growing. Similar sort of process here, similar things. So there's obviously benefits to that for the economic viability, for the farmer and so on, and for the improvement of these grasslands. Now, obviously, question of whether that should be the aim for the uplands and for these quite acidic grasslands, but we'll come on to that a little bit later. So there's other things, though, that we're trying to work out if there's any trade-offs. So with putting this rock dust on, are we going to see a biodiversity change? Are the plants, all those nice little plants that are really going to struggle having 20 tons per hectare of rock dust chucked all over them? Are they going to struggle with the changes in pH, the changes in the nutrient availability? Are we actually going to lose some of these? And we're actually already seeing this, that we applied last May for the first time, and we're seeing patches of black moss appearing where the mosses are dying off. They don't really like it very much. So there's little changes happening, and we're trying to track that. Or in the water, the freshwater ecology, these quite acidic streams, are they, or all the little critters suddenly gonna be a bit kind of like, what's going on here? I'm out of here. I don't want to be part of this because we are doing this. And these are the sort of things that we're trying to work out. Alongside then just the viability. Like here's a picture of our contractor spreading using his tractor. Amazingly, he used his oldest tractor because he said that on the slopes that we're spreading on, which are on average between 15 and 20%, 15 and 30% slopes, he used his old tractor because the gear ratios are much better than brand new tractors that have automatic gearboxes. And he said, there's no chance my tractor will get up that, my new one. So we brought down his old old tractor to spread this with, and kind of we had to use this guy who was he's a bit mad, driving up these slopes, kind of going at a slight angle to make sure that he gets the tilt right, double wheels at the back, all of this. But viability of actually spreading this, is it possible? Like, there was one time where we were genuinely looking at hiring a helicopter firm or a plane to spread this across these landscapes. And so there's some viability of the future, and our demonstrator is all looking towards this of actually, if this is to be uptaken large scale in the UK, which there are organizations and businesses already trying to make this commercially viable, what trade-offs do we have? What benefits do we have? And what can we learn through this process for application in these quite extreme environments? So actually, at our demonstrator, we have 1 year full baseline, which is great. So that means that now in both catchments, we can see any sort of natural or meteorological induced changes, climate induced changes, or if it's because of the treatment. So are we actually going to see a divergence in our treatment catchment now? So we had our first application of 20 tons per hectare. So we spread about 60 tons of this stuff at 400 meters above sea level on a 30-degree slope. It is a bit crazy. We actually ended up having to spread 2 tons of it by hand, which was a job. But we're spreading that. So we did that in May, and we'll do it again next May. And we'll see how this, see any signals or trends that come from that. As I say, it was incredibly difficult to spread on these landscapes, but we want to try this. And then we are monitoring a full suite of catchment-based analyses, because we want to make sure that we catch any fluxes or flows that are happening and really constrain what's going on. So in the top right there, you can see we've got this wheel of all the different analyses that we are doing, from the greenhouse gas automated chambers, which a picture is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So these are literally taking thousands of data points of GPP, so gross primary productivity, respiration, and methane, to see actually if the application of rock dust is going to change the gaseous flux from the soil and vegetation. So there is a huge amount of data going in there. Then we have our water analyses. So you can see in the picture in the upper middle, we've installed box flumes to box weirs to capture all of this and constrain this water flow through a single point. One, so that we can track the rate of flow. This is a very, very flashy stream. So we want to ensure that we know how much is going through this. But then we have automated water samplers in there. So ISCO samplers that take a sample daily, so that we can track the water chemistry and pH and alkalinity and so on, and these key indicators that we are looking for change. But then also there's in-water parameters. So we've got a pH probe, a spectralizer for dissolved organic carbon. We have a CO2 probe and so on, all in there for these high intensity measurements to really make sure that we know what's going on. Soil, we obviously are really interested in the soil. So we take soil cores annually, and we also look at the earthworms within those as well. So we do annual assessments of earthworms just to track to see what changes are occurring. Botanical plots, we send a professional botanical surveyor to see if there's any changes in the habitat condition of these vegetation and what we have present. So going back to the same 1 meter or 2 meters square every year to check what is happening against. So we use the same process as our national field survey, to ensure that there is then comparison against the national trend as well, in case we notice anything there. Also with the vegetation, then you can see in the middle picture, we have these exclusion cages, because this is an active farmed landscape. The sheep are still up there. They will be eating and nibbling away at the vegetation. So we want to keep them off little sections where we can then cut and look to see if there's any change in the forage quality, to see if there's any if there are any additional improvements in what we're finding there, which is great. And so we go and see if there's any extra growth, or we send it off for fiber analysis as well to see if this is actually going to be better for the sheep from from a nutritional point of view, which is fun because then one of the things that really stands out for us is we also have sheep cameras out there. So a time-lapse camera looking at each hill slope in both the control and treatment to try and see if the sheep are preferentially grazing these areas, which is pretty funny. You know, it's very much a how many sheep can you spot, but we're doing an automated image analysis to see basically, are the sheep going over and thinking, oh, this grass is tasty, I want to eat some of this? Or there's actually an idea that because the rock dust will contain some sodium, are they actually going to go to it preferentially because it's almost like a mineral lick for them as well? Or actually, are they going to completely avoid it because it's all gritty and horrible and they don't want to eat it? So is there a change in their grazing pressure and so on? So it's almost a little bit of fun, but we are really trying to constrain every area of what's going on. And so we have our baseline data, and then we have 3 months of data so far. So this is literally hot off the press. And the main thing is, if you squint and tilt your head very slightly, we are maybe seeing a little response. In truth, it is way too early to really tell. But in the top right-hand corner, through the greenhouse gas fluxes, you can kind of see over our baseline year. Let me get the little pointer. Here we go, laser pointer. So in the baseline year over here, you can see it's fairly neutral across the year. But then since application with this line, is there maybe a little bit more sequestration going on? Potentially shows that, but really statistically, we can't tell until we have a full year worth of data to compare. It might have just been a better growing season year with more rain and more sun. So that's still to be determined. But then as well, we kind of see a little bit of a sign of it in the pH. So this is the in-stream probe. Kind of see the baseline year where there's very similar to the catchment and control. And then there's a bit of divergence going on this year, especially around application. Is that a pulse of more alkaline water? Is it something to do with our underlying base-rich streams? We've still to work that out. But yeah, there's some hints going on, and we've got some exciting data coming through. But to finish, I just wanted to just draw it back to the broader Plynlimon research catchments and talk about this idea of this contested landscape that we're in. Because as Jack talked about, we are in an active commercial site. So we're not in a protected area, which is quite unusual. For these long-term sites, it tends to be in our designated lands, in our beautiful spaces where there's a lot of restrictions going on, and we want to make sure that we monitor it to keep it nice. Whereas actually what we've got here are two commercial areas that we are tracking to see change over a long term. So in the farm catchment, it is a working farm, it's a sheep farm, but with reducing numbers as economically and policy means that there are less sheep numbers up there. But there's a whole load of diversification. Like the farmer there is pretty savvy. He likes to follow where the opportunities go. And across the farm catchment, he's cut in loads of rally tracks. So it is now one of the leading motorsport complexes for Mid Wales, regularly trialing these like innovative new rally cars. Colin McRae's been up there training before. I was up there a few months ago when they were testing a new kind of inception of a electric rally car around there, which was mad quick. So there's that happening. And then as well, he's just got a grant to plant loads of new trees across this catchment. So he's reduced the sheep numbers even further and is now planting trees because that is the way that grants and policy is leading him. That's where the money lies for him as a farmer. But then in the forest side, it's an active timber producer. There's deforestation happening, like the landscape changes all the time there. And they're starting to replant with more broadleaf woodlands. So it's gone from cypress spruce and more there's broadleaf being planted there because that's where policy is heading, and that is what good practice is now. And so over this long-term history, we've kind of accidentally seen these impacts of policy and funding change, the economics. So it's not just kind of the acid rain change or these environmental things, but actually policy drivers that we are seeing over a long-term change. So it's a great place to host research because it's forever changing and will forever change. And I suppose the question is, especially for these upland landscapes, they are contested. What should these uplands be used for? What is the main aim for them? Like speaking to the farmer, there's an idea that he wants to put a whole wind farm right up the catchment, which from one angle is like, well, yeah, great location to actually put them. They're popping up all over the landscape. You can see in this picture in the middle, there are some wind turbines on the farthest mountainside. So why shouldn't it become a place for energy production? Or maybe it should be a biodiversity hotspot, and we should be doing everything we can for the bugs and the critters and the vegetation. Or maybe it should be a place for carbon sequestration and spreading rock dust everywhere, planting trees, whatever is going to be the best for that location we should focus on. Or of course, we come back to the, should it actually be producing food? Should we be putting more sheep up there and producing more food? These are contested landscapes, and we sit and have this long-term research to see how there is changes over time of these policy drivers, and it makes it a brilliant site to not only do our broad scale and then narrow scale research, but to also see these changes over time. So I just want to say diolch yn fawr, thank you very much, and yeah, I think we've still got some time for questions. So